This is episode 13 of Hoops Forum, a joint effort of Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Randy Sherman. Randy, welcome back.
Thank you. Missed you last week, man.
Yeah, we did our best to fill in for you. I'm not sure if it's what people wanted, but that episode is up on the podcast. If those of you who have not listened to it, talked a little bit about X's and O's, and you can find that on a Quick Timeout podcast. Just search for that on any podcast platform, and you can listen to that. It's one of those where we did more video than we did audio as far as describing things. So may not necessarily make sense if you're listening to it in audio form, but if there's any of the diagrams or anything that you hear on there that you'd like to have, you can email me and I can send those over to you. Before we get started with today's topic, big thanks to 323 Sports for sponsoring Hoops Forum. We're about a month away. It's hard to believe we're towards the end of the school year here. A lot of you are gearing up for the camp season, and along with camp come camp t-shirts. Every kid wants his camp t-shirt. So if you're in the market for camp t-shirts right now, there's a moisture management one color print tee that 323 Sports is offering, $6.99 a piece. Great price for that. To learn more about that deal, you can visit 323sports.com or contact sales at 323sports.com. They'll be able to do it right for your sports program and for your sports camps this summer. So check them out. Most coaches across the country entering now, shifting gears to our off-season mode. And so to stay in line with that, we were going to talk today about conducting self-scouts. This is something that I know if you follow Randy, especially online, he talks a lot about this. And so we're going to pick his brain a little bit about this. The things that we're going to be discussing today, kind of keeping it to like 3 areas of concentration. We're going to try to boil it down for you. I say we. I'm the one who typed up the rundown. Randy is the one who did all the work. So make sure that he gets the credit for this.
Well, I welcome your ideas as long, on this topic as well. I mean, this is something that could definitely change in format. And if there's a better idea, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. As I went down through it, some things that we're actually discussing as a staff today. We're going away as a group to a camp and going to spend some time talking about some of these things. So it's like perfect timing for me in particular. So I'm excited to talk a lot about this. You obviously kind of shifted gears, but you've done this in the past as a coach yourself. Mm-hmm. The timing of it, I like to hear. I've heard some coaches, they give themselves a little bit of a break to let things, allow them to regurgitate some things maybe before they had to sit down and start writing things out. But what was the process for you?
Yeah, for me, I really needed a little bit of a break at the end of the season. Whenever it ended, I didn't even want to look at a basketball or hear one bounce for not too long though, a couple weeks. Usually when our season ended, it kind of butted up against spring break. So if there might be a week or two, depending on how far we advanced in the state playoffs, a week or two after spring break, and then I always looked at that Monday, if you will, after we get back from spring break. It's like the beginning of the calendar for next year's team. Mm-hmm. If you get what I mean, like that's like the fiscal year begins on that date for next year's team. So, seniors have graduated, transfers, if you're a college coach, have moved on or removed themselves or whatever. And we're left with working for next year's returnees. So that's kind of when I began this process was 2 to 3 weeks after the season. I wasn't one who's like, okay, we lost Friday night and Saturday morning I'm cranking up the video looking at our season. I needed a little bit of just a mental decompression. I felt like that time, just a couple weeks or a few, gave me time to kind of go back and look at our season kind of with a little bit of removal, a little bit of distance, to where not all the things will be as fresh on my memory. So I look at them more objectively.
Mm-hmm. There's a balance between waiting so long that you forget what actually happened and going so quickly as you do kind of after a game is over, that as soon as the game is over, you're full of emotion in it. You want to, change everything or address all the problems, and it's not as bad as it necessarily seemed to be.
Yeah. So, if I were to advise a coach, I would say if you're going to err on the side of too long though. Like I would rather it be if I need 5 weeks, a month, or if I have to coach another sport in the spring, like some high school coaches do, or something, I really don't have time to get to it till late. That's probably better, in my opinion, than just like jumping right back in the day after you got eliminated or won or whatever, because I do want a bit of forgetting, because one of the things we'll talk about going forward is like, I want to sort of be able to look at my own team as if I'm not the coach of that team, like objectively, without any of it, like you mentioned, the emotional attachments, like almost like do a mental cartwheel, if I can, like of like, this is not my team, even though it is. Like what do they look like? What's happening on the court with this team?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and kind of get to the process. We want to talk about these 3 areas and some talking points, thinking points, and some things for coaches actually to write down instead of maybe talking around things. So first one to address kind of the idea of like, who are we? And encompassed in that, you have kind of like an exercise that you do for your team. Can you explain for a coach, what do you mean, and how does that exercise help them in addressing this idea of who are we?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always say that the best time to do what we're about to talk about is the day you get hired to lead a program. The second best time is now, if you haven't done it. So I call them pillars. That word gets used to sometimes mean like our culture pillars, like communication, trust, and things like that. For me, that word meant things between the lines, the X's and O's, because this is really what we're doing a self-scout on our play. Hopefully, some of those culture pillars bleed over into your play and vice versa. But for me, the pillars exercise was like, okay, what is this? What are, as a program, as a team, what are we going to be known for? What is our signature style of play? Could be offense, defense, and then I always throw a third pillar in there that could be either or something, one of the other. Of if a coach looked at us, what if 10 coaches looked at us on film, all 10 of them would say this team is great at, or at least trying to be great at blank. 1, 2, 3. I can clearly see those things. I watch so many teams and talk to so many coaches who are like, yeah, I don't know, we do a little of this, a little of that. Like we've tried this in the past, that in the past. And I just don't see that from championship level teams. Like usually those teams, not all, but many of them have like really something defining about them. So I don't know, let's throw out some examples. Like North Carolina, the secondary break, like that is a pillar for that program. That is something that they do there. They'll continue to do there probably with their new coaching change, like that's what I know I'm going to see when I tune in to that team's game, right? So we're looking for 3 signature pillars that any coach scouting us, or any even fan who's not an expert watching us, they might not phrase it like a coach, but they sure pick up on it. I just think, there's a bell curve to teams, from bad, most are just okay, and then some are very good. And I think when you get over here on that very good bell curve, like we can rattle off, like, man, this team, their 1-2-2 press is man, you're going to face it, you get ready for it, and you just can't simulate it. Their pressure man-to-man defense, they're on the line, up the line, in your shorts, and man, we tried hard to simulate and practice, but we weren't ready for it, even though we knew it was coming. That's what I'm talking about. What is it about your team and your program? 2, 3, 4, you get into 5 or 6, it's probably too many, right? Like, what are those calling cards going to be for your program?
I would guess that some of this has to do as well with looking back then and tying it in not just to games, but like, what did we work on in practice?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like if we identify those things, like I said, the day I got hired, right? That this is what I'm walking in the gym to create. So it's a part of the self-scout in that, like, okay, the season's over. Can I go back objectively and look at our team and say, yes, we are clearly excelling in these 3, 4 areas, right, that I called pillars. This is our identity. It should be clear. If it's not, then we failed as an organization to brand our team like we said we were going to.
Did you ever ask your players to help with this? Like ask your players, like, okay, who are we, and hear what they had to say?
This will not be popular with the hipster coach crowd, but no, I did not.
I just wonder sometimes if like they know what we're trying to do. Like it's clear in our mind, but in our players' mind, like they don't really know what's going on. I would think that would, and that doesn't always, because maybe they don't necessarily know how to communicate that or whatever. But like if I ask them, what are we known for, or what are we trying to accomplish, and they give me something that's absolutely nowhere near, that should probably clue me in that I haven't really communicated to them what's important.
Yeah, that should probably clue you into that your words aren't matching the actions with your practice time.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, these are what else? This is all we work on. So yeah, I'm pretty clear on what coach, this is what we work on every single day, whether we won last night, lost last night, but this is what we do every day. So what else would our three pillars be? So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, all right. Step number one. Let's go ahead and move on to step number two here. And step number two is one that we've addressed several times on this show, so it may not be totally new, but kind of going inside the numbers a little bit. So looking at the numbers, there's a lot of numbers at our disposal, and don't feel bad about maybe repeating yourself from past episodes, or maybe this will get people to go back and listen to those past episodes.
Sure.
But maybe in addition to that, what are the most important numbers that you're looking at?
Well, I think some of that might be tied to your pillars, because different styles of play are in different tactical decisions are there to sort of drive up maybe different of the four factors. I think the numbers just really serve as like a report card, like they clue us into how we did, what was our shooting percentages, and that's encapsulated in effective field goal percentage. How effective was our defense? That's encapsulated in our opponent's effective field goal percentage. How well did we take care of the ball versus our opponent? That's captured in turnover percentage, and what the rebounding percentages. That's also one of the four factors: offensive rebounding, which conversely is our opponent's defensive rebounding, and how do we look there? So I just looked at it as like a report card for how we did. And I'm looking for like, okay, what is our biggest problem area? Like, if we have one, what's our biggest, excuse me, which of these avenues are we struggling in? Which of these, maybe we had a pretty good offense when we got a shot, but we turned it over 25% of the time. That's too high. So I might spend a lot of off-season time like, hey, that priority number one is let's go back and look at our turnovers. They're undermining our points per possession. When we got a shot, we shot it pretty well, but we have a turnover problem. I've got to go back with some distance, evaluate that, and say, okay, what situations, what scenarios on the court are causing us to turn the ball over? Is it traps? Is it baseline drives? Is it, any number of things? Like if I can find some categories and unpack by the numbers, give me my report card, I got to use the film to get, into the nitty gritty about some root causes. I'm looking for scenarios I can recreate. If it's use the example, if it's the turnovers that are undermining our team, like, is there something that's popping up as I go back and look at all these turnovers over and over again? Like every time we're trapped, we don't have sideline, long diagonal, middle, reversal. Like I know now I've identified something that maybe I undertaught and need to move up the priority chain to address. So inside the numbers is just a way of looking back at lots of things, problem areas. It's a way of looking back at our shot allocation. It's a way of looking back at our goals. Are they being met? Or how far do we have to go to be a good team statistically, at least?
I've seen you talk too a lot about like points per possession, and to your point of like, okay, so why isn't, and by the way, points per possession optimal. I mean, we'd like to get at least one. What were your teams? Do you remember like some of your better teams, what they were in? 1.1,
I coached on the girls' side, and one or higher is pretty high on the girls' side. So I had some years that were right around that or a little above it. That's kind of where we hovered, but not. Yeah. It's a little bit skewed down on the girls' side, unless I always say, like, there's less parity maybe. So sometimes, like when I coached at a smaller school, I had a really good team relative to our comp. So we would win 75-30, so our points per possession in a lot of our games were just, you could just throw that data out.
Skewed. Yeah.
So
I wonder, people that are watching, I wonder, what was your points per possession this year? That's a starting point. Like we said, okay, so why isn't maybe as high? Are we not getting shots where we need to be getting shots? Are the wrong people taking the shot? Do they understand what a good shot is? Just to your point, there's a lot of layers below that we don't just take it at face value, but we look at what's happening behind that. So I thought that was a really good point. Something that you said too, just connected to we're in the postseason phase, and we're allotted a few days to work with guys after the season is over. And one of the things that we did look at was, how are we committing these turnovers? And a lot of it had to do with we had a young team, had to do with poor footwork, and then also decision-making, recognizing secondary help defenders, picking up charges, that sort of thing. And so it actually then changed the days that we had in postseason from doing just generic skill work to actually working on those things. So again, I just think from a coach's perspective, be thinking, how should this then change how I'm practicing? Not just the things that I'm talking about, but the drills that I'm doing. What are we doing to improve? In our case, decision-making, footwork, et cetera. So I think that's maybe the practical side. We
have all this information, right? The first part of that word is inform. Information. So the video, the stats, and all that should be informing your decisions going forward. Like that's the root of that word, information. It informs you of what happened, and it helps guide your decision making going forward. I know that was one thing about midway through the years that I coached. I did this exercise we're talking about today, this exact exercise, and it's the first time I did it. I'd been coaching a head coach for 5 or 6 years, and I did this exercise, and man, like I was coaching for 5 or 6 years uninformed, where I wasn't giving myself or consuming the feedback on my team to help me make informed decisions for future teams. So that's the purpose. That's the sole purpose of it. Yeah. To inform what should we be doing more of and less of in practice going forward. And speaking of less, I think we're about to talk about that.
Yeah, before we get to that, our third area of focus here, we do want to take a quick break and tell you about our sponsor, Sideline Athletics. Talking about numbers, we thought it was a perfect lead in here. So Sideline Interactive, the leading manufacturer of scoring tables and video display boards for high schools and colleges around the country. With their technology, you have the capability to increase your school's revenue, improve fan experience, and just clean up and make your gym look even nicer. So to find out more about Sideline Interactive, visit sidelineinteractive.com. Okay, so we just teased it here. The third step and the third area of focus that we want to look at here, one that maybe is a little less popular or even like a little bit more like counterintuitive to what we think. And Randy, you can discuss that, but subtract, don't add. Let me start out with this. Why do you find, as you talk with coaches, why do you find this to be one of, if not the most difficult aspect of these self-scouts?
Well, I think as I talked to coaches over the last 6 years, there's a lot of coaches who just, maybe this thing's a little harder than they thought it was when they became a coach, and they're just looking for something that will take the hand they've been dealt with their players and improve it. So, the next new thing, the next playbook, the next new offense, the next trend, that's going to be the answer. I'm going to add that. And so to answer your question as to why, I mean, we all want to win. And especially if we haven't been heretofore, then we we're going to try something else. It feels lazy or counterintuitive, like to use your word, to do nothing if you're not getting the results that you want. And by do nothing, I mean change nothing.
Right.
So that, to many, that feels like negligent almost. Like I'm not doing, like, we lost. We got to do something. We got to change something. We've got to remove that. Didn't work. We lost, or and I just think that's a little bit shallow thinking, and so I challenge coaches on that oftentimes about, like, would it matter? Would it matter? Or is what you're considering adding better or just different? If it's better, let's talk, and that's worthwhile. But if it's just like, like crap, we had a bad season, like I'm doing something different or adding something,
The warning I would give is there's this always, and it's in human nature, I'm missing something that's hidden. And so I'm going to go look for it. And so you're always hoping that next thing that you're adding is the missing ingredient. And that's what I hear. I haven't heard that as much recently, but like, what's the missing ingredient to your team's success? Well, if I don't have the ingredient, apparently, then I need to keep searching for it.
Yeah.
And so to your point, you do end up with a 700-page playbook that nobody remembers.
Yeah. And, I think that all this ties together, back to point number one, who we are, what is going to be our playing style identity. When I begin this process, I've got to begin it with a realistic timeline for how long it will take for our players whose skill might be here, and this is the skill level we need to win this way. The space in between is my job description. So that's going to take time and contacts with my players and practices and seasons, possibly, right? And the help of for you recruiting or bringing in, players who fit that style. For a high school coach, the help of your feeder program and sub-varsity teams and things like that to help. All right, this is how we're going to play. We're not there yet. I need guys upstream from me coaching those teams to equip these players so this happens in the future. So, I think it's difficult because, like you said, like we think we're going to uncover something and that it's going to be an instant fix, and I just think that's a fool's errand.
Yeah. So if you could kind of like summarize, like I know you go through a 4-step process with your the people that you're mentoring with Radius Athletics. So can you kind of go through that, just even if it's just briefly, those 4 steps, so that a coach can look at those 4 things and maybe do what you're saying instead of trying to find the solution and something else to add?
Yeah. So I'll be as brief as I can. So step 1, we've already talked about. Define our style of play, the pillars. What are we going to be known for in this program? That's another problem I see, is like, coach, this time of year is all excited. I got my pillars. I'm ready to go. We're in practice. And then this year, these are our pillars. And then next year, you know what? I found this new offense. And so now here's my new pillars and our new. So like that's not what we're talking about. It's like, we are going to play this way year after year after year. And we're going to create a system that gives our players the skills necessary. That's step 2. So step 1, decide your style of play. Begins with that for me right up front. I know, like I admitted to a fault. Like I walked in with those. You hired this style of play when you hired me. Step 2, identify the priority skills needed to play this way. So like, let me give you an example. Like, if say I wanted one of my pillars, we're going to be the best Bob Knight style motion team in the country. Well, for priority skills for that way of play is setting screens, reading screens, using screens, setting up screens, cutting off, curling, back cutting, out cutting, making all the read, like anything. But like, let's say I want my pillars to be like dribble drive, right? Like, which has no screens in it, none. So I can ignore everything that has to do with sitting a down screen. I don't even have to learn that. I can just scroll past it, right? That to me is one of the problems I see, is coaches don't know what they can ignore. That's where we've got to begin, because there's so, like you've already said, there's so much information. I got to know, for us in our gym, in our community, in our university, in our program, I get to ignore some things, and that's a blessing. So because I've defined how we're going to play, and how we're going to play has priority skills that are germane to that style. So identify those. Look at the offense on paper. What type of shots does it create? What type of skills are needed? Like we've used the example of dribble drive. I got to be able to rip through and start a drive. I got to be able to stop. I got to be able to hit, catch, and shoot threes. I got to be able to finish 1v1. So those are our priority skills for that offense. Well, if you ran flex or Bob Knight motion, there's a little bit nuanced differences among them. So that's step 2. Identify those skills and work on them and give them to your players. Step 3 is, okay, we've defined our style of play. We've identified the skills necessary to play this way optimally. Step 3 is what is our language? What are the tools we're using, the terminology, the drills, the things that we use in this gym to teach those skills, right? So here's our skills. What tools do we use to teach them? That could be verbiage. What do we call the screen? Or what do we call the cut? That could be drills. Like this is our drill for teaching, for getting reps at catch and shoot threes, which is a priority skill for our drive and kick offense, right? So this is our drill or drills for that skill. Everyone knows it. My JV coach, my 9th grade coach, if I'm a college head coach, my assistant who's doing individual workouts, they know this is the tool for that skill. We spell those out. It's a great thing to do this year. I always say subtraction is a lot of time about eliminating redundancy. So like we don't need 5 different things to work on the same thing. So we got some redundancy here, trash them, delete them. And then step 4 is obviously implementation. So we implement the style of play, we implement the skills pathway, we recruit for it if I'm a college program. And if I'm a pro team, we draft or sign and trade for it, or to where these skills that this match our style of play. If I'm in a high school level where I don't necessarily always get to pick my players, then our player development, our practice time is about giving those players that may not currently have those skills. So I got it. The last step is implementation of it at all levels. And so that's the 4-step process.
Summarizing the tweet that you made last night, because it can be complicated or be made complicated, you've convinced yourself basketball is complicated and intricate. And I think that's our excuse as coaches sometimes, is that we do know that there are a lot of moving pieces, and then it becomes very complicated. And I think then it becomes complicated for our players as well. So this bigger idea of subtracting, not adding, do you have any resources if somebody's interested in kind of thinking through this a little bit more?
I do. A couple books. One would be Essentialism by Greg Mcewen. That is basically, it's more of like a business book. I think the author went to like Stanford Business School and consults with companies and corporations and things like that on how to streamline their organizations and how to sort of stay focused on what it is that company does without being distracted. And I found the book very helpful for coaches, and I've recommended it to many, and I know a lot of coaches have read it. And based on me sharing with other coaches, it just gets disseminated, and that's great. I think that's one I would recommend. I ran across an article recently for in Behavioral Scientist magazine that it's a new book that full disclosure, I've not read it yet, but I certainly intend to. But I did read an article on it, and it sort of speaks about this idea of our knee jerk as human beings when we're faced to solving a problem seems to be to add rather than subtract. And it sort of unpacks that. I tweeted about it in a recent blog post called Subtraction Season that I wrote a couple days ago. You can find that on my Twitter feed at Radius Athletics. But those would be some recommended readings that Yeah, that I haven't read the second book I mentioned yet. I certainly intend to. I read the synopsis of it, and it sounds like right up my alley. So I think that's would be two. There's another book called The One Thing. The author is, I'm drawing a blank on that right now, but it's called The One Thing. My last name might be Keller, of the author. That's in the same vein.
Yeah.
None of them are sports books. None of them are like written by a coach or,
which is great to get.
I find those,
so we're not
I find
all
those kind of, I really don't read those, and not that there's anything wrong with those, but like, I just don't find those that, I don't know, thought provoking is sometimes. So, yeah, so those are some recommendations.
Yeah, that's great. As he mentioned, a lot of this he'll post frequently snippets of it on Twitter, and as well he has some things on his website as well as his newsletter that sends out. So be sure, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. I know it can be difficult going and finding all of those pieces across the internet. So if you're looking for all of those together, be sure to email Randy and he can set you up with all of that. Appreciate all of those who joined us this week. Awesome topic, and maybe one that we can come back to and dive into certain parts of it a little bit further later on this off season. We are planning to continue this off season, maybe a little bit less frequent, but we'll be sure to announce that from week to week. If by chance you missed any part of this show, you can go back and watch the full episode on Radius Athletics, the YouTube page. Just search Radius Athletics there on YouTube, or you can go to any podcast platform and search A Quick Timeout, and there you'll find the audio version of the show. Randy, great to have you back. Good to have you back in the saddle, and we'll try to do this again next week.
We will.
Appreciate all of you. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you.